Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Roderick and toko ingoa. I am the CoreNet New Zealand chapter chair, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here once more to CoreNet, our whānau, our property whānau in New Zealand. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Predictions and Resolutions 22, a hybrid engagement, our first real true hybrid engagement. We've got some people here in spaces in Commercial Bay, and there's many of you joining us from home, so it's great to have you here. So please join on Slido. That'll be coming up, and David, our moderator, will be using Slido to engage with you. Okay, so first of all, I just want to thank our esteemed sponsors, of course, our esteemed sponsors for hanging in through the last year, through COVID. And of course, the contribution you make makes a real difference to this cohort and to corporate real estate through New Zealand. So thank you very, very much for continuing to support CoreNet New Zealand and this group. Okay, I just want to first of all just remember Nigel, who many of you know passed away last year in November. He was a great leader for 15 years of our CoreNet New Zealand group. And so it wasn't only the pandemic that was difficult for us, but definitely losing Nigel was a big challenge for us all here in this CoreNet group. But certainly Nigel is smiling over us, and we've used the last 3 or 4 months through the Christmas period to really shape up what 22 looks like, what this calendar year looks like. And we've reinforced our committee to really drive ahead this year. So I just want to take a moment to introduce a few new members in the committee. We've got Robin Montgomery from BBD, who joins us as Treasurer. Many of you will know Robin, who's in the room today. And Caitlin Venus from Robert Jones Holden. Welcome to Caitlin, who takes up the membership position. Liz Wiley from Spaceworks takes up diversity and inclusion. Great to have her here today. And Gail Corder from Fonterra, many of you will know, takes up the chair-elect position in sponsorship. So great to have some new people in our committee. Okay, just a few more slides here before we hand over to the event. So we've got a selection of events coming up in the near future. First of all, we're kicking off with what's really topical, it's COVID. So we've got people joining with us around the world to share their experience, and many places around the world are ahead of the curve, ahead of us and what we're going through now. So first of all, we kick off in a few weeks, 4th of March, with an event where we connect with one of our colleagues from the UK, and we'll have follow-up events through March and April along that theme as well. Perspectives from the UK is first up. Then on the 10th of March, we're into our Young Leaders event, How to Create a Mentoring Culture in a Hybrid World, hosted by Bailey's. That'll also be a hybrid event. And then in March, we intend to run Predictions and Resolutions in Wellington, connecting with our Wellington whānau in a hybrid event as well. So some great events coming up. We've got a real runway. But of course, our signature event is our symposium. And this year, it's all about pushing the limits. It's about the way forward. How are we going to move forward? What's really topical and what's going to challenge us and get us thinking? Sustainability, productivity and culture, technology, the challenges of growth and fast contraction. So some really big topics. We've already secured some great speakers, and we'll be announcing those shortly, and also announcing how we're going to run this event. So we really want to make it available to a wide range of people. We will have face-to-face, and we will be connecting virtually as well. So we're providing options. So there'll be more about that later, but we're really, really keen to really connect with you, and we're really going to push that through in May. We're not pushing it out this year. We're going to confidently run at that Pushing the Limits CoreNet Symposium this year. Okay, so that's pretty much it for me now. So I'd like to hand over to David, who's going to be our moderator today at our Predictions 22. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rod. Kia ora, everyone. Good evening to a very different CoreNet New Zealand Predictions and Resolutions event for 2022. Current COVID framework restrictions have sadly meant that we've had to rearrange the deck somewhat. to how we usually hold this. And as such, we've not been able to get everyone together as we would normally have done every year. However, we are excited to have this as our first ever live stream hybrid with our wonderful panel of speakers all together. And we appreciate you guys and our CoreNet audience joining us from your offices, your homes, your friendly cafes, maybe the odd bar. Holding this in this way has meant we can still deliver our promise to you of providing fresh, thought-provoking and educational content on the world of New Zealand real estate. And that's something that we're really keen to do this year throughout 2022. We do hope that we'll be able to hold something like this in person and some much needed catch-ups that we get with this event in the near future. But for now, it's going to be hybrid. Big thanks also to our sponsor, IWG, for accommodating this hybrid session here this evening. We really appreciate them providing us this space and allowing us to set up the equipment that's been enabling us to stream out to you guys today. I'm sure that once the current restrictions are lifted, we'll look to hold something also here in this wonderful space on the level 17 of Commercial Bay. Well, maybe it's just me, but the last 12 months seem to have passed by very quickly. But also in a weird way, there was moments that time just dragged on. For those of us in Auckland, I just want to say and give a huge kudos for the tenacity, patience, and durability that we showed over what was 107 days of lockdown. It certainly was challenging from both a mental and physical perspective, and its effects on families, businesses, small, medium, and large, can't be underestimated. I guess we should be proud of our resilience, as we showed that, basically we could deal with it. But let's hope we don't see something similar happening this year. And no, that's not a prediction. If 2020 was the year from hell, I would regard 2021 as one of limbo and frustration. In New Zealand, it felt for many of us that we were constantly stopping and starting. After a period of what was relative COVID-19 serenity, our knowledge of ancient Greek was at least improved with the onset of the Delta and the Omicron variants, but also the stress, fear, and frustration that accompanied their arrival. With the frequent alert level changes from 3 to 2 to 4 to 3 to the traffic light system, when we all had questions around when we could get back to the office, when will the schools open again, when will we be able to travel, see our families, get through the challenge of MIQ, when can I get a haircut, how do I keep close to my clients, when can we celebrate our achievements as a team, when will this end? So holding this event tonight is a prime example of how things have changed. And yes, it isn't frustrating that we can't be all together, but it is also evidence of how we have managed to adapt to a new way of doing things. Now, outside lockdowns and the dreaded C word, a fair bit did happen last year. In New Zealand, we enjoyed for quite some time a more normal existence than much of the rest of the world. Now, who's going to forget the glorious summer when Emirates Team New Zealand dominated the races on the sparkling Waitemata Harbour and managed to retain the 37th America's Cup? The economy was actually in a positive state overall, despite the continued challenges for the hospitality and tourism industries. Unemployment in New Zealand actually fell to 3.4% at the end of the September quarter. And there was an array of additional reasons to celebrate. We signed a free trade agreement with the UK after its painful departure with the EU. And I actually think that it seems to be in favour for New Zealand. The CoreNet New Zealand team once again delivered a world-class in-person event with world-leading content and incredible speakers, and very supportive turnout from our sponsors and our members. Perhaps at this point, I'll also like to point out that the property industry was declared to be worth $41 billion to the country's economy. So that cements in all of our minds, I'm sure, that we are working in an incredibly important market. In the world of sport, canoeist Lisa Carrington became New Zealand's most successful Olympian, winning 3 gold medals at the delayed 2020 Olympics. The Black Ferns went one better than they did in 2016 with a gold in the sevens final against France, and Black Cap Ajaz Patel became only the 3rd bowler in Test cricket history to take all 10 wickets in a Test innings against India. The All Blacks had a mixed year, winning the 2021 Rugby Championship, but falling short against Ireland and France. Globally, though, the year was dominated by the impact of the pandemic and the global vaccination rollout, but 94% in New Zealand should be applauded. But also what was notable globally was the 6th of January insurrection riots in Washington, product shortages, ships stuck in the Suez, rich guys going to space, and that included Captain Kirk, dreadful weather events, riots in South Africa, Facebook becoming Meta, coups in Myanmar, the Glasgow Climate Change Summit, the US withdrawal in Afghanistan, the Great Resignation, a year without Trump. No, don't think so. And an unknown winning the US Open. Actually, that was a prediction made by Nick Moyes from Jazzmax last year, although he was talking about the men's draw and not the possibility of Emma Raducanu, the young Brit, winning the ladies' event. But what showed me for 2021 is that we certainly live in interesting times. Actually, last year's panel of Nick, Paula Bennett, Chris Fahey, and Erica Jury did get a few things right, with some accurate picks on the growth of use of data, the rise in public-private partnerships, supply chain issues, and the continual embracing of the flexible workplace. But perhaps they did or were dealt a dab hand with the difficulties we saw in the latter part of the year. I wonder if Nick is a vegan with bacon. We need to ask him. I'm going to introduce our guests to you in a moment, but as is becoming traditional, we have a few questions to ask you, our audience. There's quite a few of you here, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Sadly, we can't use our usual scientific way of capturing your thoughts with use of colored pieces of paper. So that's why I've asked if you could use the Slido for this evening. Just to recap, if you can either, I'm sure a lot of you know what QR code is these days, but if you can either use the QR code or go to Slido on your browser and type in hashtag CoreNetNZ. I'll give you a minute to do that, or 10 seconds perhaps. So moving on, first question of the day. Will we see cruise ships in the Auckland Harbour this year? Will it be back to the pre-2020 times? Well, is at least another year away? It's been so long, it's about space travel now. It is for a few people who've got a few billion. There's quite a lot of you who think it's going to be at least a year away, which is sad, because I think we all miss those cruise ships. So I'd like to know who thinks it's all about space travel. Thank you, guys. So on to this evening, and moving on to our panel. We have 4 fresh CoreNet speakers. Never spoken at a CoreNet New Zealand event before, I think. Maybe prove me wrong with Christian, I'm not sure. But we have Anna Rusk from Resolve XO, who's just returned to New Zealand from Melbourne. We have Christian Pistower, director for Meta 5. We have Vernon Sequeira from Jasper, and we have Gavin Reid from JLL. I'd like to first introduce Anna. Many of you would have actually known Anna, perhaps, before your sojourn in Melbourne, maybe. I'm sure there's a few people in the market may know you. She returned to Auckland in the latter part of 2021 and now heads up Resolve XO's New Zealand office. No stranger to CoreNet events in Australia, I understand, but it's her first involvement in New Zealand. So please welcome Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for the introduction. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I know it's unusual circumstances. I want to sort of just first touch on Resolve XO, who we are, and the fact that we represent only corporate occupiers, and that's in the commercial industrial space. It's really important we have conflict-free. And part of that, and to link into that, is the fact that we often see trends and also the sentiment from tenants in the market before anyone else does from a day-to-day basis. So I, like David said, I've just relocated back from Melbourne after 10 years. I had a national role over there, so I got to have involvement across all cities at that point in time. And a big thing about why we're setting up in New Zealand is because we've always had a lot of requirements here, and we always got a lot of pushback from the Kiwis, and I would always tell the Australians, we're different, and we all need to remember that. You can't apply Australian practices and thought processes to New Zealand, and I think we're really missing that independent advice over here, and that's why we've come back to set it up. And to sort of link through to the theme on that, we are similar in some ways, and I just want to talk about the trends or what I'm seeing in Australia and how we can apply that here in New Zealand. So Australia's probably 3 to 6 months ahead of us in terms of the I always want to say Omnicom because that's a client of ours, but in terms of the outbreak, and even though they've all had the massive outbreak, no one's still going back to the office. So Melbourne's still a ghost town. Every other shop still has a full lease sign up. The high-end restaurants, which is really interesting, are actually really busy. but the small retail cafes there aren't. So people aren't going and having their lunch, aren't there during the days, but they're going to the cities at night to spend a lot of money. And then the other side, in terms of Sydney, there's more of an encouragement to go back. But the new normal is very different to what our normal is here. So there's a lot of movement to still get people into the office, but everyone's really hesitant to go back in. And the big thing for both cities, or actually all around Australia, apart from WA, because it's the hermit kingdom, kind of like us, if the mask mandates are coming down, I think on the 25th of February, which is a huge, huge thing, because no one wants to go into the office if you're having to wear a mask. And the benefit of what we've got here in actually New Zealand is that we don't have that more stringent policy around having to wear masks. But still, I think it is a restriction in relation to wanting to come to the city, having to wear masks. It's a bit niggly, and why I don't want to do that. There's all these restrictions, and I think until restrictions really pull back further, and we won't see people coming back to the CBD. And I just don't believe it's going to be the same, and I don't believe it ever will be the same. And I think if anyone thinks the CBDs will go back to what they were, you got rocks in your head, is my sort of, is my point on that. So there's three things I want to talk about, which are the three greats. And actually, David mentioned one before, which is the Great Resignation. And in my view, I don't believe that's actually happening here in Australia and New Zealand. Yes, the recruitment firms are really busy. I've got a couple of recruitment clients who are having some of the best years. And, well, one of them in New Zealand it's because government keeps hiring. But we don't have it because we don't have our borders open as much as everyone else does. So you don't have the ability to pick up and leave and come back. There's too much uncertainty. But what will be interesting is when our borders do open, as to whether, say, the 18 to 30-year-olds go, I want to get out of this place because I'm so bored. But then you might have the other turn, people from the UK, America, and go, right, well, actually, I want to come to New Zealand because it's like this magical place where you live around green trees and like beautiful water and all those sorts of things. So in terms of my prediction around that, I'm hoping that net migration will be pretty relatively even, but I think we will have a shortage in relation to our sort of mid-tiers and then mid-tiers within our organisations, and that's going to be a challenge for leaders and CEOs going forward. And that's why your workplace and your office is going to be really important in how you structure that and how you look after your staff going forward to retain the mid-tiers, because I think they're actually going to get on a lot of planes very shortly. So the next thing is the great reconfiguration, and this relates to the private sector. I think the private sector's had the biggest challenges over the last sort of 24 months, and a lot of my clients who are, of course, private and corporate, I don't do a lot of government work, but they are looking at their space and going, how can we actually make this better? And before we had agile working, but really, in my view, and a lot of other people, I think it was just a term, but no one actually did it. Whereas now we've actually implemented like Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all those sorts of things and actually truly become an agile workplace. And the private sector's encouraged it because they need to look at their expenses and their operating costs. And on average, I'm seeing around a 20 to 30% reduction in terms of the office occupancy that my clients are demanding across Australia and New Zealand. And a lot of the briefs and the requirements I have at the moment, it's like, well, how can we reduce the space? And actually, of all the 100 staff we have in, probably only half come during the week, and it's really changing the way the private sector's really been innovative in terms of changing the way they work and knowing, and this isn't the term I've coined and people might have taken it, but I think it's all about office. You've got retail destination, you're going to have office destination. So you want to go to the office, you need to create an office that people want to go to. So it's like an IKEA, right? You drive to IKEA because you want to go to IKEA. You need to make your office a bit more like that, just not with IKEA furniture. So the last one's a great stagnation, and anyone who works in government might not like what I'm about to say. So I think, with our government here, they did a fantastic job at like keeping the borders shut. They slammed it down, stop, no one come in. And I think we did that with all of our office. Stop, don't come in, don't do anything. And the private sector took that on board, government took that on board. But then, like I said, the private sector's moved in a different direction. And I think now that the government just hasn't taken the opportunity to reinvent themselves. In fact, in Wellington, I know for a fact, because you've got, what are you running, like 2% vacancy, I think, in Wellington at the moment for like prime grade space. Let Jones Land talk about that. You probably tell me different. But you have government still taking up space, and for my corporate occupiers, I just can't get any because the government keeps expanding, but they're not actually looking at the way they're working. So I think The government they need to, in terms of how they look at property, need to reinvent themselves and maybe take some learnings from the private sector. Not telling you how to do your jobs, but just as a recommendation. So my predictions. I have one just big prediction, and I was going to say anarchy, but we're not going to use that stronger word. We're going to say there's going to be a big backlash. People are desperate for information, true information. And you see it in Wellington at the moment. There's disinformation, but I think there's elements of people just don't trust information anymore. People don't trust what's coming out. People are sick of being told what to do. And I think from the extreme example of Ukraine and Russia, you're going to have conflict there. You're going to have conflict within governments. We've got conflict with our own government. You've got conflict with its people. And you even right down to being at home, your son might start questioning you a bit more about politics or something, because it's so much in the news, but also people are just sick of being told what to do. And people are desperate for real information and finding their own information. So I think we're going to see more backlash, more uprisings, people asking more questions, and I'm excited for it because I think we're all a bit beaten down. I'm beaten down. I spent, I don't know, like a year in lockdown on my own in Melbourne. Like I'm ready for the whole world to open up and get on with it. So I'm going to have, that was my main prediction, and then in terms of resolution, not a lot of you don't know me, but I like to dream big, and I'm just, my resolution for the year is, well, to take over the New Zealand property market. So if any of you would like to join me on that journey, get in touch. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. One thing I did forget to say, actually, if anyone had any questions, then please do use the Slido app. I don't know if we've had any whilst Anna was speaking. Our roving reporter, Ihemba Mbamba, is actually controlling the questions for me today. So I just wondered if there was anything, Ihemba, for Anna?
There's just one. From your experience, what can Kiwis learn from how Aussies have dealt with the return to the office journey?
What they can learn. So I think messaging from the leadership team's really important. So getting that right, so not scaring your team, but actually encouraging them to come in. And I think there's too much negative messaging around, you can't do this, or you don't say can't, say you can do this. I think how you deliver those messages. I think that's probably the main thing. I think it really comes from top down as to how people feel about it. I know Coca-Cola here has told their team that they have to come into the office workers, because that way the operations teams or the guys on the ground and the DCs and that don't feel like it's two teams. But at the same time, you need to look at each team individually and their needs as to what is safe and what is important to those individuals. You can't just blanket approach, and I just think, probably won't be more specific and use more positive wording from the leadership team and not scare people, because that's encouragement and get people. And I think a big thing about creating an office which you want to go to as well, doing different things. People putting on lunches, people putting on pizza even on Fridays to get people to go in. Just simple things. Yeah.
Thank you. Any others? I have one question, or actually it's a question, having been in lockdown in Melbourne and then coming to New Zealand and being in lockdown in New Zealand.
Yes.
Which is worse?
I was living in an apartment on my own in St Kilda, which is brilliant. It was beautiful. It was lovely. But I'm not sure if you all knew, I don't think Kiwis really knew this, is that we actually had a curfew from 8 till 6. 8 p.m. at night wasn't allowed to leave my apartment until 6 in the morning. And everywhere I went, and when I had to exercise, I had to have a mask on. New Zealand was much better, but I also was living at Ruakaka, which is up north. So I don't know if you know it. My mum's new house, so I'd have to say New Zealand.
So you're enjoying being back in New Zealand then?
All I can say is that I've never felt I chased the corporate dream, and I know that if there's younger people on here, I did chase the corporate dream, and it was definitely worth it, and I wouldn't be where I am today without have gone to Australia. But I'm a Kiwi and I love being home, and I'm done, and I just love it. So yeah, thanks.
Well, it's great to have you back, and thank you very much for taking part this evening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anna. So moving on, as I said, please do use the Slido app for any questions you may have for our speakers. I've got another question for you guys, pretty topical, I guess. Who's going to be our next Auckland Mayor? Phil Goff has actually stepped down, so There's actually going to be a few choices out there. Is it going to be someone from the traditional political spectrum? Is it going to be someone from National? Is it going to be someone from Labour? Last year, there's talk about Paula Bennett becoming mayor or running for mayor. Or is it going to be someone, a maverick bar owner, perhaps? Not sure who, but someone who possibly might like to throw his hat in the ring and get rid of his bar. Or could it be, the prophet? Maybe not. But no, it looks like the maverick bar owner is a little bit in the lead, so it'd be interesting. I think it will be an interesting election, so probably the first in a while, actually. Wow, 50-50. Interesting times. And no one's gone for the prophet. I'd like to move on to Vernon Sequeira from Jasper. Now, a huge focus this year for us has been the reigniting of our Young Leaders division within the CoreNet New Zealand team. One of the unexpected pluses of the pandemic actually has been that many of our promising stars of the future have remained in New Zealand and not gone on their OE, and I believe Vernon is one of them. I think you were potentially going to be going to Laos, I think, for a while before you decided to stay and actually join Jasper. So his loss, or their loss, is our gain. Please welcome Vernon.
Yeah, thanks, David. It's always good to be in front of you guys and do some crystal ball gazing. So yeah, just a bit about me. As David mentioned, at Jasper for 2 years now as an investment manager. I'm pretty much the conduit between our capital partners and our asset management teams. So I guess virus this, virus that, unprecedented times. I'm sure you've all heard the updates. So yeah, I'm here to share a couple of predictions that I see. So take that all with a pinch of salt. And yeah, so I guess the value for prediction for me is not the prediction itself, but really the act of making it keeps us responsible for the decisions we make today. So I guess I'm going to try to do that from now on. So a little bit about Jasper. For those of you who don't know, we're a tech-enabled fund manager. We leverage a world-class engineering and real estate team to make real estate accessible to more people. And that's the crux of why we're looking to take this. We had a mammoth 2021, and for us, it's all about doubling that and doing more than we did last year. We were one of the largest acquirers of industrial real estate in Auckland, New Zealand. So it's just more of that, really. And we've got a pretty clear strategy with an epic team in behind us to make that vision come true. A couple of sort of, I guess, predictions or resolutions for us. On the acquisition front, we're looking to diversify out of industrial. So looking at some key sectors such as retail and healthcare, and looking to bring a couple of those offers to market in 2022. So that's something that we're quite excited about and where we see real value in the market. On the asset management front, we've got a pretty robust value add program that we need to execute on. As mentioned, we acquired about 10 assets last year, and each of those have some comprehensive plans that once executed will deliver a really good sort of value back to our investors. So that's the key focus for me and on the investment management, asset management side. At a corporate level, we're always growing and looking to bolster up our investment management finance teams. So that's going to be a key focus for the first 2 quarters here. Yeah, and look, we've built an epic culture, but the key word for this year is consistency. Any business can do what we did over 1 year, but doing that year in, year out is going to be an epic challenge, but we'll really prove our stripes in the market. So moving into the sort of investment capital market space, again, I think industrial will go from strength to strength. The tailwinds and the underlying fundamentals remains fully intact, and the sort of e-commerce tailwind that we saw during COVID has continued unabated. So that's definitely a side that we have the most conviction in, and yeah, one that we'll continue to pursue through 2022. As Anna mentioned, on the office and retail side, they'll have to innovate and reinvent themselves. Personally, if I was given the choice to work from home or be in the office, I know what I'm picking. And but that's because we've got a really curated, awesome space to go. So every day I wake up and I'm sort of keen to get out my place and go in there. Both expensive pieces of real estate, so it's just which one you want to spend some more time on or varied time in. Yeah, but I do just enjoy the energy, vibe, synergies that you get from sitting in front of your peers, your colleagues, and yeah, just sharing ideas, bouncing things off each other, which you don't get elsewhere, or remotely for that matter. We're seeing a massive wall of capital still out there, predominantly from institutional investment overseas. So we're looking, and that is prohibited by the border closures and people not being able to do physical inspections. So I think as the borders start reopening, we're going to see a lot more competitive energy in the market, especially in the sort of higher ticket office and retail spaces. So we'll sort of see that in the market as we go. Yeah, so I guess interest rates has been in the news, interest rates, inflation. So the forward curve for that will force some cap rate compression across the market, expansion. And there will be parties that have purchased assets thinking that interest rates are going to remain low for long. So we're going to see some of those opportunities come to the market, and no doubt we'll be ahead of that to sort of capitalize on that. And another alternative sector that I quite like is the sort of dairy, rural farming area. So as you might have noticed, dairy prices and the milk auction has gone through the roof. Gavin's got a good prediction on that, which I'm sure he'll share with you in due course. I'll save that for him, but I think dairy, green energy, sort of horticulture will be one of the sort of key markets there that'll benefit from that trend. I guess moving away from real estate now, climate change, and on that topic, with gas prices at nearly $3, I know what my next car is going to be, so either hybrid or electric. So that's one for me. But you're seeing in the investment space, investors are demanding that their operators and their investment managers meet certain criteria, and that's only going to become more of a focus. And with our sort of value add program, there's a lot of sort of ESG initiatives, releasing, and sort of full refurbishments that now the sort of sustainability piece is at the forefront, because investors, the market, everyone's pricing that in, which will only become more predominant. I guess on the Russia situation, it's inevitable something will happen there. Russia dominates the energy market in Europe, so there's going to be repercussions, there's going to be some fallout there, and yeah, and hopefully sort of in New Zealand, we're a little bit more isolated geographically, and our sort of investment space is like dominated with energy, infrastructure, property, healthcare, more defensive asset classes. So we'll see some sort of protection there for the Kiwis. In the housing market, I think the triple CFA will get rolled back in some way or form, but high interest rates and a tightening credit market is going to see some cooling in that space. So for people like me looking to get on the ladder, that's always great news. So I look forward to some of that. Maybe not everyone on the call. In the crypto NFT space, I think with David mentioned that Facebook's released Meta. I think that's going to be an absolute disaster. It's true, not decentralized at all, and it's just a bit of spin and buzzwords there. Most NFTs will probably go to zero. There'll be some massive consolidation in that space there, but there'll be a few key players that will end up dominating. But then decentralized finance, I think, has got a lot of room to grow, and there's some really useful use cases that I think a lot of people can get excited about, and me included. And then going into the football, despite what they say, I don't think football is coming home. I think France is going to go back-to-back World Cups in 22 in Qatar, despite all of the controversy around that. Yeah. So I guess, and then the final one for me is esports is being trialed in the Commonwealth Games, and I predict that's going to be an absolute success, and it's going to be a permanent fixture at the Games, so that's something to look out for those of you who are not across it. And then on the personal side, I'm just looking to continue the professional development. I think I've got a lot to learn from some very inspiring and really sort of amazing people in the market. So that's going to be my focus of this year, looking at the sort of mentorship space, both being a mentor and getting a mentor. So that's a big thing for me. I've got to learn conversational German. My partner's German, That's going to be hard. Need to talk to her parents somehow. So that's a big focus for me. And then this one's slightly more embarrassing, but I've got to learn how to swim properly this year. So that's a big resolution for me. And yeah, finally, it's just spending more time with fewer people, not the other way around. So yeah, so thanks for giving me the stage, David, and I'll pass it back to you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Vernon. That's fantastic. I'll just check with our man on the ground if we have any questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple for Vernon, actually. One of them is, what are the biggest challenges you think investors will face in 2022?
I think the interest rate piece is always going to be a factor for investors, not sort of buying assets at the current level versus building in some buffer for them to expand. There'll be people that will find a lot of hurt in that space. Other than that, there will be sort of more regulatory stuff that comes through, like compliance issues that people haven't sort of thought about in their original investment case, that'll start cropping up and create sort of capex concerns. So yeah, that's the main thing. But I think there's a lot of capital still out there. So another big thing is where to place it. And if you sell an asset that has had significant yield compression, where do I place that money, etc. So it's good to find those opportunities there, because I don't think you'll see broad-based sort of capital yield expansion. So it's just sort of finding the right opportunity to place your capital.
Cool. The other question, I think you answered half of it, but it was, does your desire to work in the office include some requirement for flexibility, and how does mentoring factor into your feelings around working from home? I think you touched on the mentoring piece, but...
Yeah, I guess we've managed to create a really cool culture of working at work. It is extremely flexible. It's totally up to you and your choice. We've got the engineering teams that work from home predominantly, that's better suited to their work style, and the sort of real estate team, which is in the office and needs that sort of interaction, bringing sort of clients through and everything. So yeah, it's a balance of teams and workspaces, but ultimately it's up to you and how you work best. But that's delivered pretty good outcomes, and we've managed to incorporate a lot of simple tech and workflow management tools so that is almost seamless across teams.
Thanks, Vernon. And yeah, a real pleasure to have you on board this evening, and I hope we can have you on future panels as we go forward. Moving on, another question for you guys. Do you think we've seen the end of boosters? Try not to be too controversial. Yes, Omicron will settle this. Not until the end of the pandemic. Don't care, just keen to get my free kettle with the Pfizer loyalty scheme. Yeah. Well, it's clear that obviously that we do feel that this is still got some way to go. So, moving on. I'd like to introduce Gavin Reid, who's head of research for JLL in New Zealand. Gavin joined JLL towards the end of 2021 as head of research after an 18-year career, I believe, at Westpac, and has quickly established himself as one of the go-to experts in our market. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have him here today. Please welcome Gavin. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Just see if I've got the slides right. Evening to you all, and certainly thank you for taking time out of your day. I know having something at the end of a work day, particularly if you're at home, makes it even harder sometimes when maybe someone's trying to cook dinner in the background or keep the kids under control while you can actually listen in and hear what we've got to say. So certainly some of the stuff you do need to take, as Vernon said, with a pinch of salt that I've got for you, and a couple of serious comments as well. So just starting off on New Zealand's future, certainly do believe that we have a positive future ahead. Doesn't mean to say there's not going to be bumps on the way, and we will see those. I think as you go through economic cycles, there's always going to be winners and losers, unfortunately. And what the last 18, 24 months has clearly shown that, for hospitality and tourism, they've done it extremely hard and still going to struggle through 2022. But a couple of the, I guess, key indicators we look at and keep an eye on as to more medium, longer term for New Zealand is around population growth, where we think, and some analysis done by JLL and also with Oxford Economics, show that we'll be slightly under 1% of population growth through to 2030, and that will certainly underpin confidence and activity. Along with that will be growth around our GDP, which I think we have it sitting at about 2.37 on average over the next 8 years. And again, if that activity level does play out, then I think that does provide a good backdrop for New Zealand, and there will provide activity, it will provide opportunities, and it's always the interesting factor or question is, where are those opportunities going to be? Seeing the crystal ball at the start, I actually have to be fair and be honest. I think my crystal ball got smashed many years ago, so I'd love to have a brand new one. So David, if you could provide it, that'd be really good. Already touched on by Vernon, but certainly ESG, it is top of the pops and it's not going away. And I actually think there's a responsibility by all of us. We've all got a role to play. And I think it's really important, particularly in New Zealand, that whether it's mum and dad at home or the kids, we've all got something that we can do. We can change a habit, we can change a behaviour. Is it going to work and buying a takeaway coffee and taking that paper cup every single time instead of actually grab a keeper cup and use that continuously? So there's many things that we can do individually, which might seem in the scheme of the globe really, really insignificant. But I think collectively, if you go across the globe and everybody does something, it actually can make an impact. But certainly around ESG, from board reports, maybe going back 5 or 6 years ago, there wouldn't have been a lot about that. Where now a lot of the institutional, particularly public, there's a lot of information around what corporates' own strategies are, what their actions are, and what is really good to see is they're actually tracking what they're doing and being measured so they can show influences that they're doing through their changes. In real estate, we've got a real, I think, opportunity to be a leader in this market and in ESG. And when you look at where nearly 40% of global emissions are around carbon, and particularly when you bring that through to the cities, you've got 70 to 80% of that is from the cities. So we've got to really think about how we develop our cities, what we use to create, how we use transport, how we use cars. Interesting, Vernon's comment about, his next car is going to be electric or a hybrid. I actually feel a bit guilty because I bought a new car a couple of years ago and it's all petrol, and I actually feel a little bit guilty driving in some days. So next time, I definitely think I'll be on the same strategy of looking at, making my part, doing my thing to help. Interesting though, when you look also at science-based targets and the amount of companies that are registering and getting on board, that last year there was 986 corporates registered for that, and that's more than the whole number from 5 years before. So I think that clearly shows the importance of those strategies around ESG. And ESG to me is actually a massive elephant, and for a lot of businesses, particularly as you go smaller businesses, it's about which part of the elephant do you bite first, what do you do? And I guess that's where, if you're talking about your office space, there's experts, we have experts at JLL that can help around those conversations and look at what is your office layout, where are the things that you can do to make an impact. Part of ESG is, we all understand, and I think there's a lot around the carbon, the net neutral. JLL, we've signed up to be net neutral by 2040, but it's around those environments and communities, providing people with well-being, and the well-being has been really important over the last 18 months. End of last year, we ran a survey, and from employees, it was really clear that they wanted to get back into the office. In fact, from those respondents, only 2% said they wanted to work at home full time. So 85% said they wanted to work from the office 2 to 4 days a week. But it's about bringing that hybrid model to cater for that flexibility that they need to work collaboratively. And I think the young employees that are seeking information and really want to understand their industry and learn have really struggled with working from home and not having that conversation with an experienced colleague that's a shoulder away previously. And so, looking at that informal mentorship that happens within offices, I certainly think there's a lot of work we can do to help the young within our industry to come up to speed and learn about how we can work with our clients and work with our environments. To me, maybe the next best thing for employees is the 4-day working week. You can see offshore there's some countries that are running trials, Spain, Ireland. You've got Belgium about to announce through Parliament that employees will be able to opt in for a 4-day working week. And certainly there's a couple of companies in New Zealand that do that now. And it's about trying to retain and attract staff, because it might not be the big migration of staff, but it's actually about staff maybe looking at other corporates that provide what they're looking for. And so I certainly think this will become more and more of a conversation point in New Zealand through 22 and into 23 and beyond. I'd love to say that we'll be able to order something from offshore. We know it'll be here next week, but actually supply chain issues in New Zealand continue. Our small size doesn't help us. Think about if you're a Chinese manufacturer and you get an order for 4 containers from someone in New Zealand, and then the next email is a whole shipload from a corporate in the US. We certainly know who that Chinese manufacturer is going to supply to. And COVID certainly hasn't helped around staff, and as corporates tell their staff not to come in, or manufacturers. So that unfortunately I think is going to continue through this year. And there's a lot of publicity. You only got to walk into a supermarket and you see bare spaces on shelves of product that we would import that we can't get. So certainly I'd like to see it be resolved quicker, but unfortunately I think it's something we're going to have to bear with through 22. This is one of my predictions. I think the Trans-Tasman bubble will open sooner. As much as we have a great rivalry with Australia, our two economies are very well linked, and I think it's important from the employees that do and can then move freely between Australia and New Zealand. I'd like to think that there's as much to offer here than there is in Australia, apart from maybe a higher wage, but I think that bubble will open, and we saw that last year in that short period of time, the amount of Australians that came over and spent money in our cafes, in our hospitality places. So we'd certainly welcome that being open quicker. My prediction on this is I think it'll be open before the end of August. There you go. Another prediction, and it's not so much that there's going to be more toll roads in New Zealand, because I actually think we will have more, maybe triple by 2030. I always find it interesting that our first 2 toll roads are in Tauranga. When you think of the size of Auckland and the population of where we could put, and we obviously now have one. But the key to this is around the funding. And David, you touched on it from last year's CoreNet presentation, was it's around the private-public partnerships to fund these. I also think you need to add in there private-public and iwi partnerships, because we've got iwi with a lot of money, a lot of capital, and they're looking to get returns to look after their whānau and provide continuity for strategy. So I think, watch the space. I think there's more to happen here. This is my last prediction. The All Blacks will not lose 3 in a row. I don't think New Zealand would take it. Maybe we'd export the coach for 3 in a row. So I think sometime in June, we'll win 48-15. I'm not sure who we're going to play. We're definitely going to play that first game at Eden Park, because that's where we win all our games. And possibly, without knowing who the opposition will be, it's going to have to be an easy beat so we break that losing streak.
Thank you, Gavin. I understand that Ireland is the next team to play the All Blacks, actually. So, yeah. So for my Irish friends, they may actually find that quite a challenge.
I think
or maybe quite a prediction.
Yeah, we'll keep the borders closed for that one. We'll have a warm-up game.
I don't think the borders will open like quite a lot faster. I think there's be too much business. Yeah, we'll talk about this later, but pressure for it. Anyway, move on.
So, any questions from the audience?
Yes, we've got one for you, Gavin. What can landlords do to make their properties more attractive to businesses to keep investing in office space for their teams? But I think, yeah.
I think the first thing that a property owner is obviously to talk to their tenant and making sure their tenant actually understands what their staff want. Actually ask them, whether it's as simple as doing a survey, look at what they want. I think the thing is talk to the experts that understand what other corporates are doing that are hitting the sweet spot, we've seen a lot more demand for creating collaborative space. It's not just a matter of putting a whole lot of desks in the office anymore. Those days are gone. You want more open space. You want ability where you as teams can go and work together collaboratively, because that is one of the key drivers, I think, in the office is we want to work together on whatever our workflow is, whatever our projects are. We want that interaction with each other. The important thing is actually ask the questions, have those conversations. Maybe don't assume that you think you know what they want. Is go and ask and find out, because it will be slightly different from different occupiers as to what they want for their employees and for their business. So I think that's how you get it right.
Just on that, as an occupier or representing occupiers, I think it's really important for landlords or investors to understand that it's a partnership between the tenant and the landlord. It's not landlord-tenant and this is what you're getting and you'll deal with this. It's a conversation, it's a relationship, and the tenant is the customer of you. So being able to having open conversations. When you walk into a shop, if someone ignores you or tells you what you're buying, you're like, yeah, no, I'm leaving. But if you actually talk about it and you come to a resolution, the best relationships I have with the landlords and buildings that you go to are the ones where you like the landlord, you know you're going to get looked after, and you know the building works. So, yeah.
Engagement.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Probably the other one is also location. Particularly probably more specific Auckland is, staff don't want to be travelling a long time to get to work, because that does create a barrier. So I certainly think that understanding where is the best location for the businesses that you're looking to work with.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Gavin. Moving on. So, quick question about the economy. We've heard a little bit tonight. How confident are you guys with the prospects for our market in the 2022? Are you fairly confident, a tad worried, or do you think, ooh, I'm out of here? I'm always interested to see who picks C. And that's interesting, because this time last year, the audience, particularly in Auckland and in Wellington, a little bit in Wellington, but certainly in Auckland, were very positive about the coming year. So I think it's going to be a challenge this 12 months. So moving on to our final speaker for the evening. And thank you very much for your patience, Christian. I'm actually especially pleased to have Christian here this evening. I was haranguing him for over a beer at last year's event to try and get him to commit to coming to this year's event. So it's great that he said yes, so thank you. He's been well known in CoreNet circles for many years, and is the co-founder of a Meta 5, so is at the forefront of much of the narrative of how we're seeing the future of the world of work. So welcome, Christian.
Well, thanks, David, and thanks for not forgetting me. A quick introduction to Meta 5. So we're a consultancy. Our core fields are workplace strategy, workplace technology, project accommodation and project support, and change management, and we're independent, so we don't do anything else. So come talk to us if you've got any needs in this field. So enough about shameless self-promotion. I've got 3 kind of barbecue predictions and 3 kind of more professional predictions. So I'll start off with the barbecue predictions. Number one, America's Cup sadly will go overseas. Why do I know? I don't know. It's just a gut feeling. So sad to see it go, but that's kind of the vibe I've get. Secondly, everyone in this room and in this call will be a close contact within the next 4 months. So that brings me to the next point. Have you sorted your supplies? Because there will be shortages. And so I can tell you, I got my favorite tiramisu stockpiled. And the key thing is we just don't know what will be in shortage, because if we would know, we could actually take an action. And that's the whole kind of quintessence of this pandemic. It's unexpected. So I think there will be shortages we wouldn't have even expected, like in the services sector, healthcare, agriculture. So I think there will be surprises, but I think nobody will starve. So I'm confident we'll get through this, but I think we all have to be a bit flexible. That brings me to the next predictions, which are more workplace related. So prediction number one, the future of work is not flexibility, it's actually managed flexibility. What do we mean by that? So pre-COVID, everybody was kind of in the office, and although you would basically do activity-based working, everybody was in the same room. It's really easy to communicate. You just go over and shout to somebody and you get their attention. Now we're in a state of unmanaged flexibility where people are in and out the office and nobody knows the hell what's going on. And we think it needs a lot more guidance and structure and boundaries around it to make it actually work. So the current status is kind of really well summarized by one of our survey comments we do through our workplace experience survey. I really love this one particularly. I want to come to the office to see my colleagues, but no one is in the office anyway, so I don't go. So that kind of summarizes the state we're currently in. And it's kind of a hot potato because a lot of the employers don't want to kind of put those boundaries and guidelines in, but at the same time, we know from our research, people are craving for boundaries and guidelines. So what corporates need to do is start working on a really kind of new and updated process to develop a flexible working framework that includes very clearly where to work, when to work, how certain roles have to work, and how certain teams have to work. It's really around the clarity piece. And it has to work for everybody. So the feeling it's out there, we've talked to a lot of our clients also in the government sector, the tenor is it's very one-sided for the employees a little bit. Like, I can't tell them which day to come. Oh, surprise, everybody is working from home on Monday and Friday. What a surprise. So it has to work for the business, it has to work for the employees, and it has for the people that actually manage those people, because they have the hardest job. Managing people somewhat remotely is a real headache. So it needs to work for everybody. And I think my previous speaker already alluded to a lot of that. It's a much bigger ecosystem you actually have to consider. It's not only where and when to work, you have to consider how do we train a knowledge share? How do we create a workplace culture? How do we train our leaders? How do we create, like what technology we actually use? I'll talk more about that a bit later. How do we enable our people to actually work from home? Now it's there's no structure. Do they have a second screen? Yes or no? Nobody really knows. Are they effective? Yes or no? Nobody knows. It would be good to know and to think about the things. And how does the office work in the future? So there's a lot more to this flexible working ecosystem companies need to consider. Which brings me to prediction number 2. There will be multiple forms of flexible and hybrid working. So just to give you an overview about the conversation we have with our clients. So I would say there's like 5 major streams we're seeing shaping up. There's the office first, basically 4 days, 3.5 to 4 days in the office. Then some organizations go to 50-50 approach, and other organizations go to remote first approach. At the same time, larger organizations and more institutionalized organizations go with a role in team-based hybrid model where different teams have different ways to do things. And some organizations choose the fully flexible model. This is basically free for all, which it's a bit hard to organize, but it works quite well for smaller organizations that have good communication channels. A really good thing for all of you at home, if you want to test the quality of your flexible working policies, you go to 5 random employees and you ask them that question. You ask them, how would you describe your flexibility at work? If you get 5 different answers, which is very likely, you know you're in trouble. So you can keep on asking, but it will tell you, like, just ask the simple question. Seriously, go out, ask this question. And if Rebecca comes and says, oh, thanks for asking, we have an office-first hybrid working model, and our team charter clearly defines when and where we work and how we stay in touch, then you know you're on a good journey. So this is really, it's a real problem, but it's worthwhile exploring it, and we work with a lot of our clients now to develop those holistic frameworks. Lastly, a piece of advice for organizations. If you are your ability to implement hybrid is dependent on the maturity of the organization. What we mean by that, if you are a Fortune 500 with a lot of processes in place, KPIs, and a real robust process of how you manage your people, you can obviously be more flexible. If you are a small company with lack of processes and it really relies on everybody being in a room, just don't go, do a light touch hybrid, because it will serve you much better. So we see a lot of problems. If it's too complex, you need to manage it really well to make it a success. Which brings me to the last point, a core fundamental thing. Leaders are kind of the crucial part in this piece of puzzle, because ultimately it's a top-down approach. You need to get the leaders on board to really make it successful. So walk the talk, and it's a big problem that juniors want to come to the office to be learned and mentors, but the seniors stay at home because they have a different lifestyle. So you need to put mandates, boundaries, and guidelines in place to make it actually work for, again, everybody. Which brings me to my last prediction. We'll see a trend, quality over quantity. So by quantity, we mean there's probably less office space, but at a higher quality. So what we mean by this higher quality, first of all, quality spaces. There are great designers out in New Zealand. So design really makes a difference, and you need to kind of create the reason and incentives why to come to the office. But it's not only design, you need to curate an experience. You know, if you've got a more transient workforce, you really need to look after the workplace. And this is where corporates can learn from co-working spaces, because that's what co-working spaces do really well. They look after the space and make it a great experience. So we see office concierge, events, so you need to curate the experience. And lastly, quality technology, and we see a lot of trends in actually, obviously, good personal tools, good AV tools in the office. It's one touch, so the times where you need 15 minutes to start up your laptop and get the preso up should be gone. But what we really see a big trend is actually digital people and space management, so desk booking, room booking, and software solutions that help us to identify where people are. And operation analytics will become really important to manage the spaces going forward. That's us. Thanks for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Christian.
My resolution.
Yep, that's what I was
sorry, I forgot that. I'm terribly bad at any resolutions. I always say I go and do more jogging, and I do it probably till Feb. So that's my end of Feb. That's my resolution.
Well, we've still got a few weeks to go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions actually. Can you share an example of an organization that is doing something inspiring or doing something really well on a global or local level in terms of what you've described as, you know, what's coming?
Yeah, one example would be, for example, we worked with Sanofi in Sydney on the new headquarters, and they implemented a really well thought out 50-50 model where people are in the office half and half. I think to their favor, obviously it's a global pharma company with a real robust processes in place on how to manage people. But they have, I think the most interesting thing they have done, they haven't reduced the size of the office. What they have done, they maintained the size of the office, but made it a much lighter space so that the work point density is only 16 square meter per work point, which is much above the others in the industry. So they really introduced a lot of the collaboration spaces, a lot of these extra spaces, the event spaces, the team spaces. So actually, they have really put the quality first, and they haven't gone the route down to we can chop off 30%. So that's, I think it's a good example.
And the other one was, I think you touched on it lightly, but what role do you see technology playing, and what tech solutions have you seen to assist organizations implementing managed flexibility?
Yeah, so I think tech will be the key. I don't want to name any actual solutions, but I think having a unified platform that pulls together desk booking, room booking, space utilization data, and how you manage the space in an easy-to-use interface with your actual users, so they actually use it, will be critical. I think there's some aspects around with managed flexibility around how you manage your teams. So if I go to the office, I want to sit next to Bill. I want to have the ability to book a desk to sit actually next to the person I want to work with. So this is where technology can be a real asset, but it has to be simple and work. So I think this is where there's a few providers out there. I'm not going to name any.
If they want to know more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christian. That was fantastic. Appreciate you taking the time. So we're coming almost to the end of this evening. And there's the crystal ball, Gavin. So I'll hand that over to you later on. A quick question for you guys. And we talked a lot about this tonight. And it is a bit of a concern, possibly a conversation actually away from COVID. The war in the Ukraine, how do you see it happening? Or how do you see it developing? Are you expecting military engagement? Do you think there'll be a diplomatic resolution? Or is it just Putin playing mind games? Nothing to see here or worry about. So pretty sobering, I think. People are expecting a little bit more of a difficult time. And we have got one more for you because Ihemba was keen to put this one in. So, where will the 2024 World Cup winner come from? Will it be 2022? Apologies, I'm jumping ahead of myself. 2022, South America, Europe, or do you even know what sport we're talking about? I think one of you said France. Yeah. Okie doke. Thank you, everyone. Conscious of time, and obviously you're giving up your end of your evening. It's almost, I believe the chase finished 45 minutes ago, so you've missed it, but you can get it on TV 1+1, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for coming. It's been, I think, a very successful hybrid event. It was a real shame that we weren't all together again this year. But we are looking forward already to 2023. It's my resolution in 2023 that we hold this together, but it's not a prediction at the moment. But please join me in saying thank you to Anna Rusk, Vinod Sequeira, Gavin Reid, Christian Pistower. It's been great to have them, and thank you very much for joining us. See you very, very soon.